It was March of 2017 when Panasonic released the GH5, and in this video, we will go over why I still think it is an amazing camera in 2021. If you're new here, I'm Jake McHugh, and this channel is all about making better videos. I do gear reviews and test videos to help you determine what gear you need to make the videos you want to achieve. If that's something that may interest you, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. While this camera is 4 years old, I still think it's a camera worth considering if you're a filmmaker or content creator. Now, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm going to start off with some not so great things about this camera, just to kind of clear the air and get it out of the way. For starters, everyone knows about the autofocus, or therefore the lack of autofocus on this camera. While it's gotten better with some firmware updates, it's still not as good as some other brands on the market. With having the smaller sensor size, that causes two problems as well. First, it struggles a little bit more in low light, so you have to rely on faster lenses in low light situations, but you also lack that shallower depth of field compared to bigger sensor cameras. Now, let's go over 10 reasons why the GH5 is still an amazing camera, and for number one, we're going to have to go with the IBIS, or in-body image stabilization. Panasonic cameras in general, but especially the GH5, is known to have some of the best, if not the best, IBIS on the market, and this makes it a great camera for run and gun or even vlogging situations. When you have a Panasonic lens that has optical stabilization and pair it with the GH5, you get what is called dual IS, which gives you the smoothest image possible when shooting handheld, and this is one of the biggest reasons I got this camera. And to go even one step further, there is this IS lock feature, which gives you tripod-like footage when shooting handheld, and I actually have mine programmed for the down button on mine, but do note that this doesn't work when doing moving or panning shots. This is more for just lock-off shots when you're in a quick hurry. For number two, we have the record settings, and this camera has some amazing record settings, with the biggest one being 4K or Cinema 4K and 10-bit 422 at 400 megabits per second in all-I. This is a very nice feature to have, and this is something we're first seeing in other cameras now 4 years later at a much higher price. And these settings just touch the surface. There is 4K and 6K anamorphic modes, 4K 60 frames per second, and you can shoot up to 180 frames in 1080p. My most used record setting is 4K 10-bit 422 and 150 megabits per second in 24 frames, and I find this is a good balance between quality and file size. The biggest takeaway is that this is all without any record limit and no overheating, and I can say from experience that I've never had an overheating issue with this camera. Number three is going to be 4K 60 frames per second, and I'm kind of cheating with this one with it being under the last one, but I wanted to have it on its own because prior to last summer, this was one of the few cameras on the market that could shoot over 30 frames per second in 4K. I tend to use 4K 60 whenever I need some slow-mo footage, and I like to use it in low light over 1080p because of the higher resolution. Also, when you pair the GH5 with a recorder like the Atomos Ninja V, you can shoot in 4K 60 frames per second and 10-bit 422 in ProRes. Number four is going to be the customization, and with this camera, you really can make it your own. You have a total of 6 function buttons along with a function tab that has an additional 5 function buttons on a flip-out screen, a quick menu, a custom menu page inside the menu settings, and 3 custom dials. To go on, we can also use the joystick and directional pad to set additional features, giving you a lot of customization for your needs on this camera. For example, I have 4K live crop, focus transition, and IS lock set to my directional pad for quick use. For the custom dials, I have one set for 4K 24 frames per second, one in 4K 60, and the last one in 1080p and 120 frames per second, so I can change the settings real quick with a twist of a dial. Number five is going to be the lens options, and there's a lot of nice native options with image stabilization and a smaller form factor, but with the smaller sensor, it allows you to adapt a good selection of other lenses. Because of this, you can use pretty much any vintage lens ever made, and this is a great way to get fast glass at an affordable price. And when you pair a lens with a Speedbooster, you basically have an APS-C size sensor, which helps with the crop factor in low light. Some popular lenses to adapt to the GH5 with the Speedbooster are the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, which becomes a 12-25mm f1.2, and the Tokina 11-16mm f2.8, which becomes an 8-11mm f2 for this reason. Number six is going to be the Panasonic Image App, and this one makes it a lot easier to view and control your camera when you're not around. With the app, you can adjust a lot of settings and focus from your phone, which is super helpful when you're shooting yourself for something like this here, and the app is super reliable, and I don't have to deal with any bugs or crashes. Color profiles are going to be number 7 for me on this list because you have a few good options to fit your workflow. If you want something that looks great right out of camera, you could either go with the standard or natural profile, which I actually use the natural profile myself. If you want something that has a more of a specialized or artistic look to it, you have Cinelike D, which is a little bit flatter, and Cinelike V, which is a little bit more vibrant. I actually have a video I did a while back where I compared the natural to the Cinelike D profile, and if you want to check that out, I'll have that link somewhere in the cards and in the description. And lastly, if you want to get the most dynamic range out of this camera, you can shoot in Vlog, which allows you to have more freedom in post when color grading. Number 8 is going to be the additional or not so known features of this camera. There's so many other features that don't get highlighted when you first look into this camera, like 4K live crop, which almost eliminates the need for a slider, X-Teleconvert, which punches in 1.4 times without any loss in resolution, and focus transition, which rack focuses in camera for you. And that doesn't even touch all the more video-centric features like anamorphic mode, shutter angle, synchro scan, which allows you to micro adjust your shutter angle so it matches the flicker of indoor lighting, video guidelines, time code, waveform, and vector scopes. This is probably one of the closest cameras to a cine camera in a mirrorless body. If you want to know more of my favorite not so known features of this camera, let me know in the comments and maybe I'll make a video on it. For number 9, it's going to be the ease of use with this camera, just because it's so stinking easy and a joy to use. With the ability to use the tap to focus on the flip out touchscreen, which by the way doesn't interfere with your mic jack, to the joystick and control wheel around the menu button, the battery life, and dual SD card slots, things just don't get in the way for me, and I'm able to focus on the creative task or story at hand. And because of this, you're able to do a lot as far as setting up this camera for your needs. You can build it out for cine style, narrative, or doc work, or you can just use the camera body itself for more run and gun uses. Lastly, at number 10, it is definitely the price. You can buy this camera right now brand new for only $1,300 and used for around $1,000, and for what you're getting, I think this is an amazing investment. We are first getting other mirrorless cameras on the market that can do 4K 10-bit internally. Granted, it is at higher frame rates now, but the GH5 has been doing this at 24 and 30 frames per second for the last 4 years, and those other said cameras are about 3 to 4 times more expensive than this camera, while not having some of the features that I love, like shutter angle. Because of this, I still find myself comparing this camera to the other offerings on the market, and I find that I'm not getting that much of an upgrade for my needs that makes it worth the jump in price for right now. And this is why I still think the GH5 is a great camera in 2021. It's so easy to find myself getting caught up in the gear that I use, especially when I'm creating content on YouTube and I'm always seeing the latest and greatest. But when I sit back and think about it, this camera doesn't really limit me in any way, and I find myself learning more and more about it as time goes on, and I fall back in love with it when I feel like I need something else. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button down below and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.